Alright, so today I wanted to talk about the single most powerful strategy for combat and space engineers. It's called kiting, and it's really annoying, but I still use it because it's really powerful. And I'm going to go over what it is, how do you perform it, and how do you defend against it, because that's super important. So, to start off, what is kiting? Kiting is when you intentionally try to stay really close to the edge of combat range or outside of combat range in order to not get shot. And there's two types of this. There's short range kiting, which is when you're inside combat range, but at 1900 to 2000 meters, and long range when you're outside of combat range. And I'm going to do short range kiting first. Short range kiting takes advantage of a bit of weapon mechanic jank in space engineers, which is due to projectiles and speed. Every projectile has a maximum speed, maximum range, and maximum flight time, and projectiles also inherit your ship's velocity, but when you're moving directly forward, they don't inherit any of your ship's velocity, so it's almost as if you're standing still. Short range kiting takes advantage of a bit of weapon jank in space engineers that has to do with how projectiles work. Projectiles inherit the speed of your ship, and they also have a maximum range. This means that when you're flying directly forward, the projectile acts as if you're not moving at all, because it inherits your speed and then gets cancelled out because it can only go so fast. But when you're flying backward, the projectile acts as if you're flying backward, it's in your frame of reference. When you are kiting someone out and you're flying at about 2,000 meters, which is right at the edge of combat range, they're going to fire at you. And normally, if you were standing still, their projectiles would hit you, but because you're moving backward at 100 meters a second, in the time it takes for the projectile to reach you, you have moved outside of its effective range and you won't take damage. The slower the projectile moves, the more apparent this is. With artillery, they will explode at like 1,800 meters away if you're flying backwards. The reason this is so powerful is because if you don't take damage and your opponent does, you're going to win. And it's also really annoying, and a lot of newer players don't realize that this is a thing. So you can fly backwards on a lot of newer players, and they just won't be able to hit you, and they'll be like, what's going on? It's really funny. The second method of kiting is long-range kiting. This is when you stay outside of combat range, like completely outside, like 2.5 kilometers. The idea is that you can wait for your weapons to charge and then really quickly fly in, fire your weapons, and then leave before your opponent has a chance to shoot you. But if they're on their A game that day, they might still hit you. Another strategy to use with long-range kiting is taking no lead indicator shots with railguns, which basically means you need to guess where your opponent's going to be without the lead indicator, almost as if Warfare 2 didn't exist. This is hard to do, but if you can pull it off correctly, you can fly in and shoot at your opponent and hit them, and then leave before they've had time to target lock you. And most people in this game don't shoot at you until you're target locked, so you'll be perfectly safe until then. So now let's talk about how do you counter this. And if you want to look at the really in-depth stuff, Alehouse has a lot of stuff on how to counter people who are kiting you and like counter people who are really good and like sweaty people and stuff. But the basic idea is that if you don't have a jump drive, you press S. Why do you press S? Well, it's simple. Now you're not flying into your opponent anymore, and you're on an equal playing field. And then they kind of have to resort to long-range kiting because they can't short-range you, so then you can just time it and beat them. The other option is to fly backward in the hopes that you can kite them out, but in most cases, if they're kiting you, they're going to have a smaller, faster ship, so they're going to have a maneuverability advantage, and you won't really be able to kite them. So the real solution to this is fly backwards like you were going to try to kite them, and then fly forwards. And then you're going to be in close range because they won't have time to back up, and you can kill them. That's about it for if you don't have a jump drive. It's a lot simpler if you do have a jump drive. The simple method is just jump away. Bam, you're done. That's it. The other, more difficult but funnier option is to jump behind them, do a 5 kilometers jump behind them, and before you jump, press S and go in the other direction. If you're lucky, they won't realize it, and now you'll be about 2.5 kilometers from each other with you and them moving at each other very quickly, which is going to be good for you. So, yeah, that's about it. I hope you learned something from this. Go out there, win some PvP fights. It'll be awesome.